Hello and welcome to Declassified. I'm your host, Gina Shakespeare. You are now watching part one of a two-part series on Spygate, the true story of collusion, how America's most powerful agencies were weaponized against President Donald Trump. Spygate will likely be remembered as the biggest political scandal in modern history. Obama administration officials actively colluded with the campaign of Hillary Clinton and foreign governments to affect the outcome of the 2016 presidential election. Unofficial intelligence, spy traps, and a politically funded dossier were used to launch a counterintelligence investigation and surveil the campaign of candidate Donald Trump. Efforts intensified following the election through the use of coordinated leaks and the ongoing creation of false narratives in the media. Jasper Fackett, chief editor of the American editions of the Epoch Times, along with Epoch Times contributor Jeff Carlson, have designed a comprehensive infographic to match this video and help you explore the connections of Spygate. The link is in the description below. In part one, we will be covering the FBI, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, the Department of Justice, the battle between Rosenstein and McCabe, and concluding with the State Department. Just before we get underway, please feel free to subscribe, like, and hit the notifications button. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook. Let's get underway with this story written by Epoch Times contributor Jeff Carlson. Although the details remain complex, the structure underlying Spygate, the creation of the false narrative that candidate Donald Trump colluded with Russia, and the spying on his presidential campaign remains surprisingly simple. It can be broken down into 7 parts. Number 1. CIA Director John Brennan, with some assistance from Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, gathered information, intelligence, and fed it throughout our domestic intelligence community. Number 2, the FBI became the handler of Brennan's intelligence and engaged in more practical elements of surveillance. Number 3, the Department of Justice facilitated investigations by the FBI and legal maneuverings while providing a crucial shield of non-disclosure. Number 4, the Department of State became a mechanism of information dissemination and leaks. Number 5, Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign and the Democratic National Committee provided funding, support, and media collusion. Number 6, Obama administration officials were complicit and engaged in unmasking and intelligence gathering and dissemination. Number 7, the media was the most corrosive element in many respects. None of these events could have transpired without their willing participation. Stories were pushed, facts were ignored, and narratives were prompted. Let's start with a simple premise. The candidacy of Trump presented both an opportunity and a threat. Initially not viewed with any real seriousness, Trump's campaign was seen as an opportunistic wedge in the election process. At the same time, and particularly as the viability of his candidacy increased, Trump was seen as an existential threat to the established political system. The sudden legitimacy of Trump's candidacy was not welcomed by the US political establishment. Here was a true political outsider who had no traditional allegiances. He was brash and boastful, he ignored political correctness, he couldn't be bought, and he didn't care what others thought of him. He trusted himself. Governing bodies in Britain and the European Union were also worried. Candidate Trump was openly challenging monetary policy, regulations, and the power of special interests. He challenged Congress, he challenged the United Nations and the European Union. He questioned everything. Brennan became the point man in the operation to stop a potential Trump presidency. It remains unclear whether his role was self-appointed or came from above. To embark on such a mission without direct presidential authority seems both a stretch of the imagination and particularly foolhardy. Brennan took unofficial foreign intelligence compiled by contacts, colleagues and associates, primarily from the UK, but also from other Five Eyes members such as Australia, individuals in official positions in UK intelligence such as Robert Hannigan, head of the UK Government Communications Headquarters, Britain's equivalent of the National Security Agency, partnered with former UK intelligence members, former MI6 head Sir Richard Dearlove, former Ambassador Sir Andrew Wood, and private UK intelligence firm Hacklit all played a role. In summer of 2016, Hannigan travelled to Washington to meet with Brennan regarding alleged communications between the Trump campaign and Moscow. On January 23, 2017, 3 days after Trump's inauguration, Hannigan abruptly announced his retirement. The Guardian openly speculated that Hannigan's resignation was directly related to the sharing of UK intelligence. One method used to help establish evidence of collusion was the employment of spy traps. Prominent among these were ones set for campaign advisors George Papadopoulos and Carter Page. The intent was to provide or establish connections between the Trump campaign and Russia. The content and context mattered little, as long as a connection could be established that could then be publicized. The June 2016 Trump Tower meeting was another such attempt. Western intelligence assets were used to initiate and establish these connections, particularly in the cases of Papadopoulos and Page. Ultimately, Brennan formed an interagency task force comprising an estimated 6 agencies and all government departments. The FBI, Treasury and DOJ handled the domestic inquiry into Trump and possible Russia connections. The CIA, Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and the National Security Agency, NSA, handled foreign and intelligence aspects. Brennan's interagency task force is not to be confused with the July 2016 FBI counterintelligence investigation, which was formed later at Brennan's urging. During this time, Brennan also employed the use of reverse targeting, which relates to the targeting of a foreign individual with the intent of capturing data on a US citizen. This effort was uncovered and made public by Devin Nunes in a March 2017 press conference. I have seen intelligence reports that clearly show the president-elect and his team were monitored and disseminated out in intelligence reporting channels. Details about persons associated with the incoming administration, details with little apparent foreign intelligence value were widely disseminated in intelligence community reporting. From what I know right now, it looks like incidental collection. We don't know exactly how that was picked up, but we're trying to get to the bottom of it. As this foreign intelligence, unofficial in nature and outside of any traditional channels, was gathered, Brennan began a process of feeding his gathered intelligence to the FBI. Repeated transfers of foreign intelligence from the CIA director pushed the FBI toward the establishment of a formal counterintelligence investigation. Brennan repeatedly noted this during a May 23, 2017 congressional testimony. I made sure that anything that was involving US persons, including anything involving the individuals involved in the Trump campaign, was shared with the FBI. Brennan also admitted that his intelligence helped establish the FBI investigation. I was aware of intelligence and information about contacts between Russian officials and US persons that raised concerns in my mind about whether or not those individuals were cooperating with the Russians, either in a witting or unwitting fashion, and it served as the basis for the FBI investigation to determine whether such collusion or cooperation occurred. This admission is important as no official intelligence was used to open the FBI's investigation. Once the FBI began its counterintelligence investigation on July 31, 2016, Brennan shifted his focus. Through a series of meetings in August and September 2016, Brennan informed the Congressional Gang of 8 regarding intelligence and information he had gathered. Notably, each Gang of 8 member was briefed separately, calling into question whether each of the members received the same information. Efforts to block the release of the transcripts from each meeting remains ongoing. The last major section of Brennan's efforts involved a series of 3 reports and greater participation from Clapper. The first report, the joint statement from the Department of Homeland Security and Office of the Director of National Intelligence on Election Security, was released on October 7, 2016. The second report, Grizzly Steppe Russian malicious cyber activity, was released on December 29, 2016. The third report, assessing Russian activities and intentions in recent US elections, also known as the Intelligence Community Assessment, ICA, was released on January 6, 2017. This final report was used to continue pushing the Russian collusion narrative following the election of President Donald Trump. Notably, Admiral Mike Rogers of the NSA publicly dissented from the findings of the ICA, assigning only a moderate confidence level. Next up, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Although the FBI is technically part of the DOJ, it is best for the purposes of this article that the FBI and DOJ be viewed as separate entities, each with its own related ties. The FBI itself was comprised of various factions with a particularly active element that has come to be known as the Insurance Policy Group. It appears that this faction was led by FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe and comprised other notable names such as FBI Agent Peter Strzok, FBI lawyer Lisa Page, and FBI General Counsel James Baker. The FBI established the counterintelligence investigation into alleged Russia collusion with the Trump campaign on July 31, 2016. Comey initially refused to say whether the FBI was investigating possible connections between members of the Trump campaign and Russia. He would continue to refuse to provide answers until March 20, 2017, when he disclosed the existence of the FBI investigation during congressional testimony. Comey also testified that he did not provide notification to the Gang of Eight until early March 2017, less than 1 month earlier. This admission was in stark contrast to actions taken by Brennan, who had notified members of the Gang of Eight individually during August and September 2016. It's likely that Brennan never informed Comey that he had briefed the Gang of Eight in 2016. Comey did note that the DOJ had been aware of the investigation all along. Following Comey's firing on May 9, 2017, the FBI's investigation was transferred to Special Counsel Robert Mueller. The Mueller investigation remains ongoing. The FBI's formal involvement with the Steele dossier began on July 5, 2016, when Mike Gator, an FBI agent and assistant legal attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Rome, was dispatched to visit former MI6 spy Christopher Steele in London. Gator would return from this meeting with a copy of Steele's first memo. This memo was given to Victoria Nuland at the State Department, who passed it along to the FBI. Gator, who also headed the FBI's Eurasian Organised Crime Unit, had known Steele since at least 2010, when Steele had provided assistance to the FBI's investigation into the FIFA corruption scandal. Prior to the London meeting, Gator may also have met on a less formal basis with Steele several weeks earlier. In June, Steele flew to Rome to brief the FBI contact with whom he had cooperated over FIFA, The Guardian reported. His information started to reach the Bureau in Washington. It's worth noting that there was no dossier until it was fully compiled in December 2016. There was also a sequence of documents from Steele, documents that were passed on individually as they were created. Therefore, from the FBI's legal perspective, they didn't use the dossier. They used individual documents. For the next month and a half, there appeared to be little contact between Steele and the FBI. However, the FBI's interest in the dossier suddenly accelerated in late August 2016 when the Bureau asked Steele for all information in his possession and for him to explain how the material had been gathered and to identify his sources. In September 2016, Steele travelled back to Rome to meet with the FBI's Eurasian squad once again. It's likely that the meeting included several other FBI officials as well. According to a House Intelligence Committee minority memo, Steele's reporting reached the FBI counterintelligence team in mid-September 2016, the same time as Steele's September trip to Rome. The reason for the FBI's renewed interest had to do with an advisor to the Trump campaign, Carter Page, who had been in contact with Stephen Halper, a CIA and FBI source since July 2016. Halper arranged to meet with Page for the first time on July 11, 2016, at a Cambridge symposium, just 3 days after Page took a trip to Moscow. Speakers at the symposium included Madeleine Albright, Vin Weber and Sir Richard Dearlove, the former head of MI6. Page was now the FBI's chosen target for a FISA warrant that would be obtained on October 21, 2016. The Steele dossier would be the primary evidence used in obtaining the FISA warrant, which would be renewed 3 separate times